This is a Triple J podcast.
Hello, welcome back to the Science with Dr. Karl podcast. My name is Lucy Smith, and this week we go back to basics. We talk about how magnets work, how wind happens, but we also get into some serious tangents. You're going to find out what Dr. Karl's favourite tea is at the moment. That's all coming up. Let's jump in. Karl, how are you?
Ever so peachy keen. Life is good. It's warm. The flowers are smelling nice. It's springtime, even though it's the middle of winter. Hey, maybe global warming is real anyway. I read an interview in the Financial Times of London yesterday, and it was with the new chief meteorologist of the United Kingdom. She used to be the chief meteorologist of Argentina, and she says it's not too late. Now, I want you to mentally think of, I've got a pen, and I'm gradually pushing it towards the edge of a table. I give it a push, it moves a little bit. I give the same size push, and it always moves the same distance. But as it gets closer, things get a bit dangerous. And at some stage, I give it the same size push, but instead of just moving a few millimetres, it falls off the edge of the table and falls to the ground, and bad things happen. Okay, we have not reached the tipping point.
Okay.
So we can still fix global warming and reverse things. So that made me feel so cheerful knowing that it's not too late.
It's not too late.
It's not too late. We can bring conditions back to what they were before, not just when the people listening to the show were born, but before their parents were born.
Okay.
We can do that with today's technology. That's why I'm so happy.
All right, good.
Okay, I know it's irrational, but I'm happy.
No, I think it's rational. Well, let's get into the questions. We've got Jordan from New England to kick us off. Jordan, what do you want to know this morning?
Good morning, doctors. This relates to what you were just talking about, really. My question is about humanity's impact on other species. So, given that the human population has exceeded 8 billion and as a consequence has led to the extinction of many species, do we know of any creatures which have thrived as a result of our expansion? For example, the cephalopods.
Okay, question for you without notice. Do you like a chicken schnitty or chicken palmy, baked chicken, fried chicken, chicken nuggets, chicken soup?
Gotcha.
Yeah,
Okay,
I'm
right.
a fan of the chicken.
Okay, they have thrived. The weight of chickens is greater than the weight of all the other birds on Earth put together. And the only reason is because every single commercial chicken is vaccinated on the day that it hatches and every 2 weeks later. Back in 1937, a disease happened called inflammatory, some IBV. It would kill chickens. It would spread to chicken flocks and it would kill 100% of them within 24 hours. And suddenly, the slowly growing chicken industry just came to a complete halt. There was no cure. So the only way you could have chickens was there'd be a chicken farm over there, and you could go in there and buy a chicken, and then there was another one a long distance away, and so that way they'd be separated from each other because we didn't have vaccines. And then we came up with vaccines. So in the old days, chickens were like, oh, Lucy Smith's coming for dinner. Oh, my God, let's go and buy a chicken. And she smelled the chicken dinner. Oh, my God, you put a chicken on for me. And then about 40 years ago, they came up with the vaccine. The situation today, there's still about 400 variants of this terrible bronchial disease in chickens roaming the world, and we've got about 80 vaccines. And the only reason you can have a chicken schnitty, a chicken palmy, or any sort of chicken you want instead of it being like a once-in-a-month really expensive deal is because they all got vaccinated. So to answer your question, yes, there is at least one creature that has flourished as a result of human activity.
But then we eat them.
That's a different thing. Yeah, we do. And in fact, they seem to be the main biological component of landfill. So in the future, people say, who are these things that live there? There are a few humans, but gee, there are a lot of bloody chickens. Were they the dominant species?
Damn.
Okay, and there are a whole lot of moral things that you go into. Read Peter Singer, the philosopher, and on one hand, we all have to die, but what matters is you have a good death. I learned that in medicine. So with the animals, they should have a good life and then a good death if we're going to eat them. But on the other hand, I've been vegetarian a lot. I've even been vegan. And according to Claire Smith, you can even be a total vegan and get pregnant and have a healthy baby and raise that baby as a vegan. But you've got to do tricks like cut back on fibre in the newborn baby, the vegan baby, and increase the fat. It's complicated. So there are grounds for... Weren't we just talking about chickens? Now we're into vegan. Okay.
I know, yeah.
Okay, right.
Did you say Claire
Collins?
Smith or do you mean Claire Collins? You said Claire Smith.
Oh, okay. Now, this is something that I should point out right now. Sometimes, like ChatGTP, I will say something completely confidently that's totally wrong. And so when I'm doing audio pre-record, sometimes instead of saying environment, I'll say elephant. But so confidently, I've just been laying down the audio track for my autobiography, which is coming out next month.
Yeah, it is.
And so the guy was listening and said, did you know that you said elephant instead of environment? No. So I actually did a mistake with... Okay, here's a question that you would know. So is Gerald, is it?
Gerald?
Is it Gerald?
Jordan?
Jordan.
Yeah, what's the acid that's in stomach acid?
I don't know.
Hydrochloric.
Oh.
Mate, I said sulfuric. Anybody who knows any physiology...
Sulfuric acid in the tummy?
Yeah, I know. Yeah, okay. So I will say things wrong and I will make mistakes, and please let me know so we can set the record straight.
But that's okay because you are a human being. Claire Collins is our mate. She is a dietitian. We've done previous episodes with her, which you can check out via the Science with Dr. Karl podcast. I will say this, Claire Smith, that's my mum's name.
I'm a cosmic man.
Yeah.
So that proves that tonight you and I have to meet for a little drink with an umbrella.
Oh my God, should we?
It's written there in the biology of the universe.
In the stars. Kim from Browley, what's your question?
Oh, hey guys. I'm just wondering, is it safe for me to reheat tea and coffee, which I've made from a kettle? Is it safe for me to reheat in the microwave several times? Sometimes over the course of a cuppa session, I'll be, distracted by plenty of other tasks, and I'll find myself reheating the cuppa 6, 7, 8 times.
Whoa.
Kim, I had to do this with my coffee during the show because sometimes I would just forget to drink my coffee. So then I started asking for it to be made extra hot. So then, but Kim, I know what you mean.
Yeah.
Is there any...
the extra...
Okay, now, is it the same batch of tea that goes through the heating, cooling process?
Yes, yes. It just cools down too much for me to enjoy it. So I jump up and throw it back in the microwave for 20 seconds. And then the first couple of sips is great, and then I get distracted and do something else, and then when I go back to it again, it's too cool again. So I just keep reheating. This is not good.
Now, is this tea bag tea or real tea with leaves?
I've just recently switched to real tea with leaves.
What's your favourite mix?
Just black tea. I've got an Aussie-grown one at the moment. I'm
trying to support Aussie, and apparently there's no such tea tree that gives you Earl Grey tea. Rather, it's regular, whatever that is, tea with bergamot oil added to it. And if you look very carefully, you can actually find tiny crystals if you look at it very, very carefully with a little hand lens. And there's also no such tree as English breakfast tea. It's just some sort of blend that they make.
Yes.
So what we have at our home in the morning is 3 parts of English breakfast, whatever that is, and 1 part of Earl Grey just to give it a bit of flavour. But in the afternoon, I tend to go for Darjeeling. You got to be careful because while they make 10,000 tonnes of Darjeeling tea each year for the whole world, 40,000 tonnes is sold and advertised as Darjeeling when it's not. So,
Oh, come on. Well,
getting back to it.
Kim's not getting through her tea.
Okay,
so does the microwave help?
Okay, so
Or
does
hinder?
I do the same thing, and I go by taste. And if the taste begins to go off, I'm thinking that, so we've got a long history. It goes back to the first emperor of China. And on one occasion, they were boiling up water for something and some leaves fell. This is a story. And some leaves fell into a pot, and that's how he invented tea. And I'm guessing we've got a long history, so it's not harmful for you. I think what you might find is that at the very worst, you might find the taste not that good, but I don't think it'll be actually harmful. So I normally go with just one reheating.
Okay. And
so chemically we're okay to keep putting it back in the microwave, you think?
Following that wonderful thing that you have in your mouth called taste. If the taste begins to go up, I actually had a bad experience for the first time in my life with a Brazil nut. And it just tasted soft and waxy, and I sort of spat out and washed my mouth. I'm thinking, I didn't wash it thoroughly enough. I hope I don't have an anaphylactic reaction and then die down here before I can call for help, but I didn't. Okay, if you're a regular person, if you hear hoofbeats, you think of horses. If you've got medical training, you think of zebras. Oh my God, I could die from this unknown and uncommon reaction.
Hey,
so I think
Kim,
it's safe. Follow your mouth.
And also, there are people texting in saying to get a heated coffee mug. I won't say the brand, but if you Google that,
So I can keep it warm.
Thank you so much. I take that to work with me when I'm. This is more of a home thing when I just make my mug at home. But they're right. Everyone's right. I need to change probably the way I make it in the first place, or what I put the vessel I'm using. Maybe There's so many nice mugs in my cupboard though.
I know you want to use a ceramic.
But it sounds like it's okay. If Dr. Karl says I can put it back in the microwave and reheat it, as long as I'm happy with the taste, I'm fine with that. That's good.
So chemically, we're doing well. Thanks, Kim.
We're doing okay. Great. Thank you.
Thank you. We've got Scan in Wodonga here. Scan, what's your question?
Hey, doctors. I just want to know, is it true that sometimes in an emergency or accident, you can get superhuman strength?
Yeah.
For example, lift a tree off someone or push a car off someone to save them?
Heard about that with adrenaline.
Yeah. Amazingly, I was in a lift this morning and there was another person there in an arm sling. And there's a whole batch of surgery devoted to falls on the outstretched hand. And you can break anything from your fingertip right up into your wrist, into your hand, into your wrist, into your elbow, into your forearm, and the collarbone, right? And I said, gee, mate, what happened to you? And he said, I tore my pect major off. Now, you've got two breast muscles on each side, and there's a pect major, which is the big one for the pectoralis, and then there's the pect minor. And I said, how'd that happen? He said, in rugby. So the thing was, as he was landing, he must have done a contraction, which literally pulled the attachment of the muscle off his bone. That's what you can do. So you have got more strength in your muscles than your firmware in your brain will usually allow to do. You can see this actually happening in the disease called tetanus, the old thing of step on a rusty nail, and you can get vaccines against it, get vaccinated. And so the classic picture in the medical textbooks is of a naked man, and he's bowed in an arch with the back of his head and and his heels touching the ground. And his belly is pointing up into the sky. And so it happens that the muscles on your back are stronger than the muscles on your tummy, so they contract. And so that's why he's bowed upwards. And then the biceps are stronger than the triceps, so his hands are up near his shoulders. And in extreme cases of tetanus, they can activate the muscles so much that they just tear off. And so what happens in tetanus, you die because the muscles that try to make your diaphragm go up are counteracted by the ones that make it go down, and you just freeze and you don't breathe. So every single muscle is switched on at close to full power, and sometimes beyond full power, we'll actually tear off. So you have the potential inside, but it's stopped by the firmware, to tear the muscles off the bone.
Okay.
And so in an emergency, suddenly you've got a relatively, I'll pick a cliche, a slight female who doesn't pump iron. And her child is trapped under the car, and suddenly out of nowhere, she can lift the car off while a bystander pulls the baby out. And she's very close to tearing the muscles off the bone. And she's sort of fighting the firmware that says, don't do this, with, oh my God, my child's going to die. So it is theoretically possible, but it's dangerous. Does that kind of answer your question? And what is SCAN short for as a name?
It's my surname, Scanlon.
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 Well, Dr. Scan.
Scanlon.
Oh,
Yeah.
so
Dr. Scan.
that's an Australian thing, isn't it? That we really, or do Americans do that? Do they shorten surnames?
Oh, always. Like, so Aussie.
Yeah, mate.
Yeah.
So Aussie.
We are answering all your science questions, and we got Sam from, is it Gawler?
Hey, yeah, Gawler, yep.
Gawler. Amazing. Sam, what's your question?
Yeah, just got a question in relating to when we get brain freeze. Obviously, is it the roof of our mouth that sends that sensation to our brain or our tongue? And then what is it that actually is causing our brain to think that it's frozen.
The short answer is our best theories at the moment say that it's cold blood entering the brain, and we compensate for it. So brain freeze, that goes back to Romans. So the Romans would actually dig a big hole in the yard and then send a bunch of people off into the mountains in winter and bring back blocks of ice on horseback and then bury it in a block of ice like, say, a metre by a metre by a metre, that's a tonne, and then bury it in a hole in the ground, and then that way they'd have cold all the way through summer. And they would make a type of ice cream back then. And they talked back then in their writings about brain freeze. And so it's something we've known about for a long time. So if you go into cold water, you can have brain freeze across your forehead. That's from stuff coming from the outside. So the current theory is based on the fact that you've got 3 arteries going into your brain. There's on each side of your neck at the front, you've got the carotid artery, left and right, and it goes up into your brain. And then you've got a third one at the back, the vertebral artery. And the 3 big fat arteries, these are big boomers, they join together in the brain to form a little circle. So if one of them gets blocked, there's still supply from the other ones. It's kind of like a redundancy system. And the best we've been able to come up with is that it can cool that part of your mouth that's lower down in your throat, like the pharynx, and then some of that coolth can then spread across, in other words, he's going the other way, to the blood going to the brain, and so you've got less blood going into your brain, so your brain compensates by opening up the arteries more to try and get more blood coming through, which will be later warmer, and that puts pressure not on the brain, because the brain has no sensors, but the meninges. Okay, here. So your brain is a soft, squishy thing with kind of the structural integrity of butter on a really hot day. And it's inside a hard, bony case. And if you wobble around, it sort of will mush up against the inside. So you've got 3 sets of membranes that sort of range from really thin, like cling wrap that envelops into every little cavity of the surface of the brain, and another one that's a bit thicker, and another one that's like fairly stiff plastic. These are called the meninges, and they have pain sensors. And so we've actually seen on scans the cold blood going into the brain, and then the person then says, oh my God, I'm now having brain freeze, and we can see that there's more blood coming through. That explains everything really nicely except for this terrible thing. Some people get the brain freeze in their shoulder blades. What's going on? We got no idea.
Someone texted in saying, I get neck freeze, not brain freeze.
Oh, right, yeah. So what's going on? Again, we don't know. Like a good example of we don't know was at one stage we thought there were about 12 types of nerves in the brain, and we did a study for $250 million, and we found out last Christmas that there were 3,300. And then there's an article in Wired about how there was a woman who had a tiny bit of her brain removed because there was something bad happening, and they got a millimetre by millimetre by millimetre. By the way, the woman's well, happy ending, a little bit of a problem, but she's overall well. And they got this tiny bit, like, do you remember that ancient thing called a match, which you would use to strike to make cigarettes?
Yeah.
Australians are so cool, we don't speak. Anyway, imagine something that's about half that dimension. So that's about 2 millimetres by 2 by 2. They looked at a bit of her brain, which is 1 millimetre by 1 millimetre by 1 millimetre. It took them about 4 years. They found several new types of brain cells that we haven't discovered on top of the 33,000 or 3,000 we discovered, 3,300 we discovered last Christmas, as well as weird structures inside that they've never seen. So to answer the question of why do you get in the neck, don't know.
Wow.
There's all this stuff we don't know about the brain, and it is an amazingly efficient computer and can do things that the best computers we have today can't and won't be able to. But anyway.
It's so intricate, but you can't really do those tests.
You can sort of remove a little bit of skin and it'll grow back. You ever remove a bit of brain, in general, that's not a good thing to do. No. And you've got to drill through the skull. It's kind of hard to get people to volunteer for that for fun.
We're going to go to Bateman's Bay now with Sue. Dr. Sue, you got a question about ticks.
Ticks.
Yes, good morning, doctors. I'm really happy that you selected my question. So ticks, I've been reading an article about recent research, 2023, about ticks can be drawn to their human or animal host by static electricity.
Oh, yeah. Yes, it's a whole big thing. So the story begins on October 31 in the year 1832. And so Charles Darwin is on a ship way out at sea, the Beagle, doing his tour around the world that would eventually lead to him coming up with his evolution stuff. They're about 100 kilometres off the coast, and suddenly the ship is inundated by tens of thousands of red spiders.
Oh.
They're dropping out of the air. They're 100 kilometres out to sea. And there were so many that all the ropes, and here's an exact quote, this is from a previous book of mine, all the ropes were coated and fringed with gossamer web. And then he looked carefully, thinking, oh my God, I'm scared of all these spiders, but he has a look, and some of the spiders would dart forth, that means push out 4 or 5 threads from their spinners, and they could see them in the sunlight because he was at the right angle, and then suddenly they'd let go of the ground and they'd fly into the air. So they would release these bits of spider web and then let go of the ground and fly into the air. And it turns out that the Earth, besides having a natural magnetic field, has an electrical field. So in a little bit of a diversion. In a storm, a thunderstorm, the bottom of the cloud is negative and the ground is positive. That's flipped in fine weather. So in fine weather, the ground is negative and there's a field of 120 volts per metre. And the spider web, another diversion here, how do they make this thing that is stronger than steel weight for weight and stronger than steel size for size with organic chemicals at room temperature? Answer, we don't know.
Yeah.
Getting back to the spider web, there's a couple of amino acids in there that are charged, and what we've seen is spiders, following on from this flying spider thing, some researchers at Bristol University, they saw these spiders putting out the web and then they would just suddenly fly into the sky. And so they got the spiders and they put the spiders, while they were putting out the web, in this box that was isolated from the Earth's electrical field. And then by changing the electrical field in the box, they could make the spiders go up and down. They could make them fly from the ground because they had a long web and they were very light. And the bad side of this is that we can easily use this technology to make flying insects that have little cameras and microprocessors on them that spy on you, and they're so small you can't see them, and they stay aloft because of the Earth's natural electric field. That was a downer.
That's not a real thing, is it?
A physicist said this was possible in 2014, and the military seem to have bigger budgets than the rest of us. So it's not impossible. But on the other hand, if you have you ever looked at your Google data file?
No.
If you've got a spare evening, make a little drink with an umbrella and, and then have a look, and it's about 14 gigabytes in size. So you had a cup of coffee here and you bought and you bought something for a friend, a meat pie. Okay, so it must be a friend because we know you're vegetarian, and it's got everything you've done over the last 15 years.
Okay, we'll save that. But
We'll save
so
that.
going
Getting
back
back
to Sue.
Oh, Sue.
So it's
Yeah, right. Okay.
So it's the electric field that these ticks are using to then attach. Is that what you're saying?
Definite don't know.
Oh.
I do know that spiders can fly, wait for it, up to 4 kilometres in the air, because the electric field can sometimes get from 120 volts per metre to thousands. They can fly at 4 kilometres high for literally thousands of kilometres. Now, can ticks do this? Don't know.
Okay.
I haven't read the paper on it. So,
All right.
But thank you for that. So what was your experience of this, Sue? What was the article saying?
Was just saying that they can leap long distances in their body size in relation to a human, like a flight of steps, to attach themselves. They're attracted to your static electricity. So I was wondering if the way you could avoid ticks, is it possible? How do you expel static electricity? Are cotton clothes things you should be wearing, or earthing walking in barefoot?
Okay. Either you can wrap some copper wire around your tummy with make jelly with very salty, and so wrap the wire around your tummy, put the jelly on it to make it conductive, then put some gaffer tape over it, and then trail a ground antenna, maybe 10 metres long behind you wherever you walk, slightly inelegant. Or you can buy special shoes that are made for people who work in oil refineries, because there's all sorts of fumes that can go bang if there's a spark, and so these are... And humans build up electrical charge. So these are shoes that have a carbon rubber in them that then will earth you out. The carbon carries electricity, or you can buy little heel things that you put under your shoe, and then there's a wire that comes up to your ankle, and that way you can get rid of your electrical charge as well. Or wear a hat.
Happy to do that, Sue?
Yeah.
Yeah, look, yep, you'll see me coming.
Windy conditions around the country this week. Taylor from Wodonga, what's your question?
G'day, doctors. It's a question from my kids. How does wind evolve and pick up insane speeds?
Don't lie, Taylor. You don't know either. You want to know? You're pushing it on the kids. The kids want to know. Karl?
Coming back from Perth a while ago, I had the fastest ever trip that I or the pilots ever had, and I think the tailwind was around 300 kilometres an hour.
Wow.
So 5.5 hours Sydney to Perth, 3.5 hours back.
That's insane.
We had to slow down because we had we couldn't fit into a gate. It was just ridiculously fast. So first cause of the wind, and there are many, is that the sun is dumping 1 kilowatt of power. So a light bulb might be 10 watts. We're talking 1,000 watts here of power. Half of that is heat. So 500 watts of heat onto each square metre of ground when the sun is directly overhead. And if the sun's off to one side, it's sort of proportionally less. So the ground gets hot, the air gets hot, and then it rises, and then cold air comes in to replace it. So that cold air moving is the wind. So, for example, in the morning, say in Sydney, what happens is that the ocean is warm. So what is it right now? So we're coming out of winter. So the ocean is colder than the land. Hang on, I'm not even going to go there, but you do get onshore and offshore winds driven by which one is warmer and the air rises above it. So the second thing with the winds, so first you just got the air rising. Secondly, you've got the fact that the Earth is rotating. So look up in Wikipedia Hadley cells, and this will be really good for you to show your children. So there's 3 sets of Hadley cells from the equator down to the North Pole and 3 to the South Pole, and the air rises at the pole, at the equator, rises at the equator, and is loaded with moisture, and it loses its moisture in big clouds, and then it flows north and south, and then warm air drops down at around 20 degrees from the equator, and that's where all the deserts are. It's warm air minus the water. It's left the water behind at the equator.
But like Taylor said, why does it get to such insane speeds sometimes? How does it vary like that?
This we're going to have, I don't know why, and we're going to have to get a meteorologist to then go to the next stage. But I was reading an article in Science about how trees make wind. And people say, oh, that's a joke. You know, the trees move their branches and they push the wind. But the trees put out water vapor. And that can then lead to rain. So the trees put out water vapor, and then that can then change the local environment so that air moves. We really need a meteorologist. If only there was one somewhere in the universe that we could call upon to answer this deep question.
I know. We've been trying to get Cy Nate on for a while from ABC News Breakfast to take us through all of this.
Come on, Nate. We love you. You know the stuff I don't know. And so that way we can keep our lovely audience happy.
So, Taylor, we got the first half, but we'll have to see on the second bit.
Hang out and make sure you ask that question again that day. Is that okay, Taylor?
Yeah, that's fine.
Look, thank you so much.
Yeah, that's fine. We've got Matt in Sydney here. Matt, bit of a morbid question. You texted in. What is it?
Yeah, good day, doctors. I've got a question. I just noticed the other day I had an ant on my shoulder and I brushed it off and it just went about on its way as they do. And I thought, if that was a human from an equivalent height, they would have died. So at what point do animals need to be of a particular size before they start dying from heights? Is that, I don't know if I'm phrasing that correctly, but yeah.
The cat. The cat is the perfect animal for falling from infinity. So I've actually done a video on this, and if you go searching ABC, Dr. Karl and falling cat, and this is based on a study in Nature where a bunch of cats in New York were brought into the local animal and veterinary hospital to see Doctors Whitney and Melhoff. And the cats had jumped out of tall buildings. So they're in a tall building and they're just sitting there at the window and a bird goes, blah, 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 fly by, and they jump, whoops, suddenly it's fall to the ground. And they found that if the cats fell from one story, there was a certain number of injuries, but the cats could survive. By the way, in the first metre of a fall, already the cats are spread out maximally with their arms and legs out, and they've got their feet down, and they can't do the sugar gliding thing. They can't. Sugar gliders can do that. They've got enough skin. Cats don't. And then if you go to 2 stories, double the height of the fall, double the energy, double the injuries, and everything kept on rising, injuries and deaths, until you got to the 7th floor. And that was the maximum. And then, the longer that the cats took to fall, and the greater the higher the fall, the less the injuries. So you reached a really low rate by the time they had jumped from a 32-storey building. And it turns out that, as you have mentioned, they had reached their terminal velocity, a rather chilling name, at around 7 stories of height. So when the cat falls out, it thinks, oh, this is bad. I'll orient anyway, but this is bad. And by the time it gets to the 7th story, it thinks, hey, man, I'm not getting any faster. I'm doing 100 kilometres an hour, and this is the average cat, average adult cat. I'm doing 100 kilometres an hour, and it turns out that as they fall further and further, they're not going any faster, but they're chilling out and they're thinking about having a holiday in the Bahamas, maybe a music concert, and they're just chilling out and they land on the ground, and then their muscles and bones stretch and ligaments stretch and bend and absorb the stress but do not break, and the overwhelming majority of cats that fall from 32 stories do survive. So their top velocity, their terminal velocity is 100 kilometres an hour. By the way, firstly, this is a flawed study. People who had dead cats didn't come in and say, hey, here's my dead cat, can you fix it? So we didn't look at all the cats that fell out of buildings, only the ones that were brought into the building. So a very skinny but fluffy, a very light but fluffy cat would survive better, but a very fat and hairless cat would reach a higher top speed. Humans, we get to 200 kilometres an hour. There have been cases of humans surviving a fall from 200 kilometres an hour. They're very rare. And in one case, a woman fell and left a good 12-inch or 30-centimetre hole into the ground. I got confused by this because I used the word good, and in my mind, being a very literal person, good applies to moral values, and I didn't know that a hole in the ground could have moral values and could be good or bad. So that's why we did the movie based on it called Falling Cats. And an ant, I'm guessing maybe 3 kilometres an hour because they're so light compared to their surface area.
Why did they say good? Are they just like using it in the show about like it's a good-sized hole? Yeah.
Like, oh, mate, she put a good-sized hole in the ground over there.
I see, yeah.
But they weren't saying the hole in the ground had moral values, and I ascertained them to be good, having explored the philosopher teachings on this matter.
Yeah, okay, good to know. Thanks, Matt.
Good to know. I mean, it's so confusing.
Oh, my God, I just said that.
The English, what we say is different from what we think.
Yeah.
Yeah, I know.
We've got Oscar. Oscar, what's your question?
Dr. Karl, there's a new startup company coming out of California called Reflect Orbital, and it's proposing on-demand sunlight to be for sale through mirrors attached to satellites that they're putting into the atmosphere that can be manoeuvred onto a specific location, basically giving like a household 24/7 sunlight or on-demand sunlight. What do you reckon the environmental impacts could be from this?
Well, one environmental thing that we've found has come to attention only in the last year, which is the increasing number of rocket launches. There are many satellites in orbit, several tens of thousands. Only about 10,000 of them actually work, and over half of them are Elon Musk Starlink ones. They have the good side that they provide internet for people who are out of town. They have the bad side that they inhibit our ability to find asteroids that could wipe out humanity, and the increasing number of launches means that we are doing so many that we are now picking up bad things in the stratosphere. There are bad chemicals from rocket launches now polluting the stratosphere and making it worse, and we did bad things with chemicals with CFCs and we stopped it. So we've got to shift over to getting into space via a space ladder. So the space ladder, the space shuttle the International Space Station takes 1.5 hours to go around the Earth. But if you have a satellite at 36,000 kilometres up, not 400, but at 36, it takes 24 hours to go around the Earth. The Earth spins on its own axis every 24 hours, so it appears to be of the same spot. So what you do is you get one of these satellites and then you run a rope made of nanotubes down to the ground, and then you set up an elevator and you go into space via an elevator. This is in a movie called 2001: A Space Odyssey, and in a book by Arthur C. Clarke called Journey to Rama. So one problem with putting stuff into orbit is that we're polluting in a bad way the stratosphere, but we can get around that. The other one is you got a beam of light focused on a house in the middle of the night. What if a bird flies through that beam of light? How much heat is there? You see, the light from the sun, the radiation from the sun is half visible light and half heat, and it could damage a bird. It could heat up your house, and if it's focused into a tight beam, from an array a kilometre across. I think this sounds like, I'm putting it gently, a con. I think it'd be far easier just to hire somebody to come and put a few 100-metre towers on your land with big lights and then just blast them. It'd be a lot cheaper. So I'm kind of thinking it's a bit of a scam, but it's not impossible. Remember the unofficial motto of the US Air Force: with enough energy, a pig will fly. Yeah, we could do it if we tried hard enough. Should we? That's a different thing.
We are doing science with Dr. Karl. I've got Todd on Darawal country. Todd, what's your question?
Good morning, doctors. My question is, how does a magnet actually bond to the metal? And then also, how do we make magnets?
Luckily, I learned this from a very clever physics student. One of the good things about being in the School of Physics is that there are all these people who are smarter than me. And I actually said to a final year student who was doing their PhD, how does a magnet work? And then Ed Gerson, he said, unpaired electrons in some of the outer shells of the atom. So think about, do you have a mental image of an atom, like a little mini solar system with the sun in the middle, a heavy lumpy thing, then lots of empty spaces, and then planets going around?
Yeah, okay, got it. Well, I do now.
But you remember that thing from high school, from primary school a long time ago?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah,
Yes,
okay.
yeah,
So an atom is like that. It's got a nucleus that is positive. It's got a heavy lumpy thing that's positively charged, and then it's got empty space, and then you've got electrons going around, and you can and the thing is that instead of just one planet in an orbit, you can have a bunch of electrons in the same orbit. And the orbits go out, and he said it's unpaired electrons. So you've got a single electron, and normally the electrons spin positive one way and negative the other way, and they counteract each other's charge. In some metals, you can have unpaired electrons, and you can do the physics, and you can say, okay, you got a single electron by itself, so that you end up with an electrostatic charge. So you move from magnetic to electric, and then it gives the effect of a magnetic field, but the electrical imbalance gives a magnetic field, and so you can have one magnet, a north, attracting another one, a south. And then he said to me, how come a fridge magnet sticks? And I said, because of unpaired electrons in the outer shell. And he said, why doesn't it wear out? Because it stays there for months. It never falls out. The magnetic field doesn't weaken. He said, hey, Karl, why does the magnetic field weaken? I said, I don't know, Ed. And he said, oh, come on, man. Remember the formula of work? And I said, yeah, work is force by distance. And he says, what distance does that magnet stuck to your fridge travel? I said, it doesn't move at all. It just stays in the same place. He said, yes, it doesn't do any work. I said, but how can it stay stuck there if it doesn't do any work? And then he started on another thing, which I don't think we've got time for, and it goes into quantum physics and everything else.
Okay.
So magnets attract because of unpaired electrons in their outer shells. And a magnet stuck to your fridge is not doing any work. That still bothers me.
Okay.
Does
Does that help, Todd?
And how would he make them?
Oh, okay. You can do it by hitting them with a hammer. You can make something magnetic, or you can have something that's magnetic and you stroke it across a lump of iron that's not magnetic, and that does something to the electrons. So you have. I'm going to have to talk to one of the clever people in physics to understand this better. So I think there's a podcast coming up on Shirtloads of Science.
Okay.
Yeah. You've started me off on one. I suddenly realise I don't know.
All right. Todd?
Okay.
I hope that helped for now. It's a start, okay?
Dear doctors, thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Todd.
I'm rewatching Stranger Things, and in season 3, Joyce, the mum, her magnets keep falling off her fridge, and everyone thinks she's crazy, but she's onto something.
And I actually walked in the prison yard that they have in the Russian jail.
Oh, in that season. That's amazing.
But it's not in Russia.
Oh.
It's in Lithuania.
Okay.
Okay, and you can do it in Lithuania if you want to go there. And it's really spooky. You think, hang on, this is where those strange creatures jump out with the weird heads that go and eat you.
No spoilers.
No spoilers. There are no strange creatures in Stranger Things. The name is a lie.
And that's it for this week. Thanks so much for listening to this episode of Science with Dr. Karl. And thank you if you've ever liked, rated, subscribed. It is so good to have you as part of the fam. And we do see your reviews, your kind words. Best looks on Apple Podcasts. He said, Dr. Karl, 5 stars. It's so good and I always learn something new. Please keep making them. Hey, we'll keep making them as long as you keep listening. Not monkey business. You said, amazing, love it, can't get enough of it. Hey, thanks heaps. If you want to leave a review, head to Apple Podcasts right now. This episode was produced by Sarah Harvey. I'm Lucy Smith. We'll catch you next week. Bye.
Dave Marchese here from the Triple J Hack team. Hey, if you love Dr. Karl's podcast like I do, you might enjoy the Hack podcast as well. Each day we bring you the news that matters to you, from the latest science on climate change to what's happening in politics and news around the world. The Hack Podcast. It's your daily fix of the news you need to know. Get it wherever you're listening now.